So, you think you want to start a garden? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Rochelle. This is Brampton Gardener, and we are going to talk about starting a garden. Okay, so if this is your first time here, welcome. I am Rochelle. I live in Brampton, Ontario, which is a suburb of Toronto. So I am in southern Ontario. I'm in a zone 5B, and my last frost date is around May 9th, but I'm not planting any of my sweet babies, especially my peppers and tomatoes, out until probably the end of May. And so I have quite a bit of time in the early part of the year to get ready and to start seeds and to prep for that. But if this is your first time and you want to grow a few things, even if you just have a very small backyard or a patio or a deck or something like that, even just a sunny window, you can still grow some food. And I applaud you for wanting to try and wanting to start, because nothing tastes better than homegrown. So this year especially, I see a lot more people being interested in the idea of growing their own food and produce, becoming more self-sufficient. Here in Canada, we are talking about that as a country needing to become more self-sufficient, but also I think it's important in a community and also in a home and in a family. And no better way to do that than to start growing some of your own food. You know what's going into it, and it's going to be much fresher and tastier. And honestly, there is nothing more fantastic than going out into the garden and picking some fresh herbs and to make your own vinaigrette or salad dressing, or to chop some fresh basil up with some tomatoes and make some bruschetta. Like, it is so fantastic. You're gonna love this journey. But it is a lot of hard work, and there's some commitments, and there are some ways to make it easier for yourself than others. So I'm going to talk about what kind of plants might be the best to choose, what kind of containers you want to be using, and also should you be growing from seed or no seed? That is the question. So first of all, let's talk about what you want to plant. First of all, you want to plant stuff that you enjoy eating. If you don't enjoy broccoli, don't grow it. And honestly, if you're starting from a garden, you really need to know how vegetables, how food grows. I think to eliminate a lot of disappointment, right? So if you go to the store and you're like, oh, I love broccoli, I want to eat fresh broccoli all summer long, and so you go and buy a broccoli start, more than likely that's going to be one broccoli. So you need understanding how many you need of a certain variety of plants in order to make it viable to be eating that, right? Like, so whether you want fresh peas or beans or tomatoes or peppers, spend a little time, do a little bit of research, because you don't want to just go and buy, like one plant and not have it produce enough to make it worth your while, right? So that's the thing. If your space is limited, grow things that will be extra beneficial. I don't know how to say this. So what I'm saying is, I live in a townhouse. I have a very small backyard. I have very limited growing space. That means I'm not going to take my time and effort to grow a lot of, say, root vegetables. Okay, here in Canada, I can buy potatoes, I can buy beets, I can buy all of those things. And when mine are ripe in the garden, when I would be going out to harvest them, that's the time all the farmers nearby are harvesting them as well. I can go buy a big, 10-pound bag of beets for $5. So for me, I would rather be growing herbs, tomatoes, peppers, things that are more expensive, things that I can kind of eat on throughout the season and not wait till harvest time at the end of the season, right? So certain vegetables have like a specific harvest time. Then there are other things that kind of produce throughout the season, things like tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and your greens. So one of the easiest, I think one of the most satisfying things to grow yourself would be lettuce. Lettuce, greens. This is a nice salad mix. You can get salad. This is, I think, this satin sheets. You can get salad Burnett, black-seeded Simpson. You can get different kinds of romaine, whatever kind of salad and lettuce greens that you and your family like to eat. And these are like cut and come again. So you buy them, you put them in a pot or a planter, and you go out and you harvest as needed, and they keep producing. Now, certain kinds of greens especially don't take a lot of heat. So in the summertime, greens are more of a spring, and then back into fall you might see them perk up. There are certain varieties that do better in the heat depending on your climate and your temperature. Something like Paris Island Cos is supposed to be a variety of romaine that does better in heat. But in the summertime you might want to switch to something more like a collard or a Swiss chard or something like that can handle a bit more heat. The nice thing about the greens as well is that they can take a bit of shade. So they don't need as much of that sun. So if you are in a limited space, you're on a balcony, you don't have a lot of full sun area, leave that for like the tomatoes and the peppers. And the greens can grow. They can grow in a sunny window even. But honestly, making a salad with fresh grown lettuce is so satisfying. I love it. And my daughter actually, that's how we got her back onto like eating salads. She wasn't much of a salad person when she was younger. And but going out and harvesting the lettuce and everything, and honestly, this smells so good. I'm enjoying just sniffing it. So yeah, so then I have like, and there's lots of different varieties of basil, right? So like, let's say you go to the store and you buy, you know, a bushel of basil to make a recipe. You get that one variety of basil. Now, if you go to an Asian market, you see a lot more different kinds of basils, right? You might see like Thai basil, red leaf basil, lemon basil. I even saw lime basil at Oceans the other day. You'll see a lot more variety. But when you grow from seed and when you go to even your local garden centers, they have a lot more variety of herbs, right? Like, I'm not a huge fan of like oregano, like just store-bought oregano. I don't like it. The dried oregano, don't like it. But I found a variety of oregano at the store last year, and I really like the taste and the smell and the flavor of that to cook with. So you can get a lot more variety in your herbs and your spices when you grow it yourself, even from store-bought. Check out if you have any Asian markets near you. A lot of them will put out a garden center in the spring, and the varieties they have there are incredible. You will see so many different varieties, lots of herbs you might never even heard of, and varieties of peppers and hot peppers and things like that, that are going to be more readily available than like your big box stores. Just aren't going to have the variety, right? They're going to have your tried and trues, but if you kind of want more exotic, look into your different ethnic markets and grocery stores, and even check on like Marketplace, things like that. So I'm just going to say straight up, if it's your first time and you've never started a garden, you've never grown a plant in a pot on your deck, don't start from seed. Like, you don't need to. Go to the store, buy a tried and true plant. Go buy your Sweet 100s, Sweet Millions, beefsteak tomatoes. Go your patio choice. You know, stick with something that's tried and true, and you know the bulk of the work has been done for you, and now you just kind of have to keep the thing alive, right? That's the best way to start the garden. If you want to start everything from seed straight off the bat, you're going to be so incredibly overwhelmed, and you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to stick with it. You're probably not going to, you know, really enjoy it and get your feet in there, right? Like, let's say you wanted to learn how to make a scarf, and so you go to a class on how to make a scarf, and they hand you like this basket of wool. And now you're like, wait, I just want to learn how to knit a scarf. But now they expect you to, you know, get the wool and make the yarn and spin it and all this and that. And it's just like, by the time you do that, you know, you're like, no, forget it. It's never going to happen, right? So there's no shame in buying starts from the stores. And there are lots of varieties out there to choose from. There's no shame in buying a hybrid. So a lot of people don't understand what a hybrid is. What a hybrid is they take one plant, let's say it's a tomato plant. This one tastes amazing, but it might be kind of less disease resistant. It might not produce a lot. Then they got another tomato over here that produces a ton. It's super hardy, it's super strong, but the flavor is kind of meh. So they take the pollen from one and they brush it on the flower of the other, and out comes this absolutely beautiful, flavorful, productive, disease resistant tomato. And that is a hybrid. Okay, that is an F1 hybrid. If the two parents are separate and it goes into that first generation, is an F1 hybrid. And that does not mean it's genetically modified or anything like that. They've literally taken a brush and, you know, dusted it onto the flower from the others. Something that's been done since Egyptian times with hybridization of plants. You take a plant that's doing really, really well and you save the seeds from that, and, you know, different varieties, and that's how that all comes out. So F1, don't worry about it. It's not genetically modified. Every single heirloom plant was originally a hybrid at some point. And so once that hybrid becomes stabilized over years and years and years and years, and it starts producing the same over and over, then it goes and moves into the heirloom territory. Okay, so don't get confused on whether it's an heirloom or heirloom. Just means that you can save the seed from it and you'll get the exact same plant. That's what heirloom means. A hybrid means if you save the seed from that, you might get the same plant, but more than likely you're going to get one or other of the parents. And you're still going to get a tomato. So it's not like you're going to be growing something weird or it's not going to be edible or anything like that. It's still going to be a tomato. Now, F1s, hybrids, of things like melons and squash, don't save hybrids off of those because some of those can become inedible. More than likely, if you're going to be buying hybrids, don't plan on saving the seeds. Okay, you can buy seeds that are hybrids, but don't plan on saving seeds from hybrid plants and then expecting to get the same plant again. That's just the way it works. Also, keep in mind when things, like I was saying before, when things are going to become ripe and to harvest. So let's say you want to grow a beefsteak tomato, right? You want a nice big slicer, you want to have that tomato sandwich and you're ready to bite into it. So you go in May and you buy your plant and you put it on your deck or your patio and you water it. And you're going to water it, and you're going to watch it, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to look at those tomatoes. And even when they have like a nice big green tomato on there, it can take like 3 weeks to ripen. And you're going to be like going nuts. Here at my house, from my homegrown tomatoes that I usually start, I don't see a big slicer until end of July. Sometimes beginning of August if we've had a slow year. So keep that in mind when these varieties are going to be ripe. If you want to grow bell peppers, those bell peppers are not going to be ripe, especially unless you're going to go for the green. But if you want like a red or a yellow bell pepper, a nice big pepper, they're not going to ripen up until like July and August. So that's great, especially if you have a lot of space, grow those. But you're going to want other varieties of peppers and tomatoes that are going to ripen sooner for you. The smaller the fruit, the sooner it's going to ripen. So cherry tomatoes are going to be a lot more productive. So let's say you only have spot for one tomato on your planter. What should I get? Should I get a beefsteak? Should I get a Roma? Should I get a paste? Get a cherry tomato. Okay, because different tomatoes are. Dexter is circling underneath trying to find the sunspot, and it's right underneath the tripod. So hopefully he doesn't end up bumping it. How you doing, buddy? Yeah. So that's the thing, is the different kinds of tomatoes. So there's indeterminate tomatoes, which will just keep on growing and get huge. And if you're on a balcony or a patio, that might not be a very good plan for you. But indeterminates they just keep growing. They don't really stop growing until they die, get hit by frost, and they will produce tomatoes throughout the season. But a determinate tomato will grow into a smaller shrub-like container. Think like patio choice and things like that. They don't get as big. They're more than likely to produce their fruit more at the same time. So that's really handy if you want to make sauces and do canning and things like that, because your tomatoes are all ripe at the same time. But if you want to have tomatoes like throughout the year to like go and grab to throw into a salad or to slice up for sandwiches, then a determinate tomato might not be the best. But then you're like, oh, but the indeterminate tomato is going to be too big for my patio or whatever. In come dwarf plants. So dwarf plants are all the rage, and they become really popular in the last 5 or 6 years. And dwarf plants refer to the size of the plant, and some of them only get this tall. And you can get different sized tomatoes in dwarf plants. So a lot of your dwarf plants are going to be cherry tomatoes, but you can get larger tomatoes. One of my favorites for growing in a smaller container is called the chocolate Tasmanian dwarf tomato. If you put in a fairly decent sized tomato planter, it'll get to be about 3 to 4 feet. It grows into like a shrub container, but you get these really beautiful, dark, juicy tomatoes in there. Perfect for slicers and things like that on a smaller plant. But it's not a determinate plant in the sense that it's going to just produce all of it at once. You're going to get that production throughout the season. So keep in mind, you can get, where did I put it? That in mind for smaller spaces. So things like this here. This is a, the package got folded down because these I got from a seed swap from my good friend Rick over at Cape Cod Life, my Cape Cod Life. These are jewel amethyst, and jewel amethyst are a dwarf variety of eggplant. So some eggplants are going to get really big and gangly and you just don't have room for them. You can get dwarf eggplants. Peppers themselves don't get that huge, pepper plants, and they like to, the saying is they like to hold hands. So where you might put one tomato in, say, a 5-gallon pot, you can easily put 2 to 3 peppers in the same size pot. So you can cram them in together. So I don't have any dwarf varieties of peppers, and honestly, I'm not really aware of any, but most of the pepper plants don't get huge, right? They don't grow into these like giant vines like tomato plants do. But you can get dwarf peas, you can get dwarf beans, you can get dwarf cucumbers. I think there's one Nicole was growing, Nicole Smith gardening, Space Master cucumber, and she grew them inside in her grow room. And she's harvesting like decent sized cucumbers. So If you're in a small space, look for dwarf varieties of plants. Keep in mind, when are these plants going to be, when am I going to see a harvest on these plants? If it's a kind of plant that's just like a one go harvest, end of season, like maybe a root vegetable, then maybe don't start with that, because you're not going to see that, you know, that instant gratification that you really want to come from gardening. Gardening is all about patience, but sometimes there are things we can fill in those spaces. So yeah, I love my big beefsteak tomatoes. I love nothing more than a big slice of that thick on some bread. Oh my God, amazing in the summer. But I don't want to have to wait till July, end of July, beginning of August to start eating fresh tomatoes. So that is why I grow dwarf tomatoes, because I can start my dwarf, and I didn't bring them down, but they're about the size of the peppers right now. I can pot up my dwarf tomatoes, and I keep them in a stackable tower type garden. I can put them out in the greenhouse, planted in that, and I will be eating fresh cherry tomatoes in May, because I can do that. But if you couldn't do that and you're starting them later in the season because you don't have the greenhouse or whatever, you can grow them in a small pot. So you can take a small 10-inch pot and put 2 tiny Tims in there, no problem. And you're going to start having tomatoes a lot sooner in the season. So keep in mind, like when you buy the plants, it should say on the tag like when the harvest on that is, and use plants, buy plants that are multi-harvest, not like a single harvest, like a cabbage. You plant a cabbage, you grow a cabbage, you grow the one cabbage, right? So it's going to be taking up real estate. And if you're in a small space, then you might want to, instead of cabbage, maybe put in some bok choy, put in some greens, put in some collards, things like that are kind of cut and come again, to really use that real estate, right? And that's what my channel is a lot about, because I do have limited space, and so it's getting the most use out of what I do have in the garden. Going vertically, stacking containers, things like that, especially for herbs, is absolutely amazing. Greens you can grow in there, nasturtiums are nice. Don't forget the flowers. I know people are like, oh, I want to grow food, I want to go veggies. Don't forget to throw in a few flowers, because not only are they pretty and they make you smile, but they also bring in those beneficial insects, those pollinators that are going to pollinate your tomatoes and your peppers, even though they're self-pollinating, so the wind's going to do that. But some of the other plants that need, those bees and the butterflies and all of that are going to come in and, eat the bad bugs. You really want to kind of create a multiculture of plants. And so don't forget your flowers. So there are some, a handful of really easy, quick flowers that you can grow from seed, or just buy it at the garden center. But keep in mind this is also really important. Certain things grow and need full sun. Certain things need more shade. And full sun versus shade, a lot of that depends on where you live. So full sun for me in Southern Ontario, Canada, is not the same as full sun in Texas. Okay, I can grow hostas in full sun here. They might get a little crispy towards the end of the season, especially if it's been a hot, dry summer, but you could not do that. They would fry up down in Texas in full sun. So keep in mind your climate. Do you get a lot of rain? Is it really dry? Is it really windy? If you are in a balcony, keep in mind that every floor or 2 floors up you go, in like a high rise or a condo, you go down a zone. So if you want to buy anything perennial, or you want to overwinter anything out on your deck, and let's say you live here in Toronto, I think Toronto is more zone 6 or 7, depending on how close you are to Lake Ontario. But let's say you're on the 20th floor in a high rise, you can't go and buy a plant that says it's zone 7 or 6 and expect it to survive, because it's going to be a lot colder up there. You're going to want to look at something that's like a zone 2 or 3 to overwinter on your deck, right? But you don't need to worry about your zone when it comes to any annuals that you grow. That's irrelevant, but I'm just saying that as in it's going to change the conditions of the plant. Up higher like that, you're more likely to have more wind. It's going to be a little bit different than if you're growing, say, in a backyard protected with fences and things like that. So keep in mind, it's an experience. It's an experiment. It's fun. Plants are going to die. Bugs are going to come and eat some of them. Birds might eat some of them. Squirrels might eat some of them. It happens. It happens to everybody. The saying goes, the best gardeners have killed the most plants, right? So you try again, right? It's like with cooking. You make something, you're like, it didn't turn out that great, but You try it again, and you know, change up a few things, and you know, over the years you get better and better at everything. So don't give up the thought of it. And for containers, self-watering containers are great, especially if you're not someone that's going to be very very good at going out and making sure, but if you do it in containers, keep in mind, especially in the warmer months, you're probably going to have to water every day, right? So a lot of times if you plant a tomato plant in ground, you might get away with watering it once or twice a week. If you put it in a pot, you're going to have to water it every day. And I know pots, containers, love grow bags, raised beds are all the rage. But if you have dirt and you have soil and ground in your backyard, dig a hole, put a plant. There's no shame in digging it, growing in the ground. I mean, that's what farmers do. That's what people have done for centuries. You know, raised beds have their benefits. If you have like really bad soil, or, you know, you don't want to bend over as far, or you're trying to make something more aesthetically pleasing. But honestly, growing stuff in the ground, like you put a tomato in the ground, it's going to grow bigger. It's going to grow taller. It's going to grow longer. It's going to be stronger. It's going to produce more. Than in a small pot. Like, it's just, it is. So there's no shame, like I said, there's no shame in buying your starts. There's no shame in growing hybrids. Do it, it's easier. Grow in the ground. If you got ground, dig a hole, put a pot, put a plant, right? If you don't, and you're in a balcony situation or a small backyard, or like me, I don't like to grow in ground because my fencing and the deck and all of that was built in the early 2000s, and it was before they changed out using arsenic in the pressure treated wood. So that's why I grow in a lot of containers, especially on the deck and alongside my deck and alongside my fence, because I don't want any of that contaminating my veggies. But if I didn't, I had a cedar fence or a newer fence that, you know, didn't have that in the pressure treating, I would just be digging my tomato plants right into the ground. Like, why not? Away from the fence in the other part of the garden, I do plant and grow a lot of stuff just in the ground. So don't think it has to be in a raised bed. It has to be anything fancy like that. If you've got a small section of soil outside or in your yard, dig a hole, put a few plants in there. You'll be amazed at how much food you can grow in a small space. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was encouraging. I don't want to scare anybody off, but I'm not going to say it's, you know, it's the easiest thing to do. Just throw some seeds down. You can go for it, try it. But you know, if it's your first time, I highly recommend going with some starts, or maybe doing a mix of both. Like say lettuce, you go and you buy a cell pack of lettuce, and you also buy some seeds. So start the seeds when you plant those, and then, you know, it'll transition out. So if you have any questions or any more advice for people that are new to gardening, please leave those down in the comment section below. And I hope everyone has an absolutely fantastic gardening season this year. And stay tuned for more gardening content coming up soon, because I'm going to be starting a lot more seeds. And this afternoon it's going to be nice and sunny. I'm going to be out on the deck, and I'm going to be starting my 2-inch soil blocks to be potting up a lot of things. So these little pepper plants, this is the last time you'll probably see them in these tiny little 3/4-inch soil blocks. They're going to be getting a new home into the soil blocks. These, I don't think I'm going to be bothering with it. The herbs will. These are going to be going out soon. So they can take some cold weather. They can take a frost, some of these greens. So they will be going out. Tomatoes are going to get potted up. So all of that's coming up on the channel. And I hope you have a wonderful season this year, and all the best. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.